All right, welcome back. As you can see above my head, our TI11 groups just got announced a few hours ago, and in this video, I'm going to be trying my best, emphasis on trying, to make my predictions for how I think these groups are going to go. And before I started recording, I kind of gave myself a bit of a rough draft of my predictions here, just so I could kind of have something to work with heading into this video. For Group A, I felt like I had a pretty good idea of which teams should be near the top, which teams should be near the bottom. But then we get to Group B and that all goes out the window. I have no rough draft for Group B. I look at this group and I just can't single out any particular team. I really think that Group B is going to be really interesting to see how that turns out, because there's just so many amazing teams in here. And most of all, they've all had pretty damn consistent seasons. And so I just am having a hard time finding a weak link. So before we get to Group B, though, before we get to that hell, which I am kind of not looking forward to because it's going to be really stressful to do, and if I get it completely wrong, people are probably going to hold me to that. But let's start things off with Group A, and I'm going to be doing these starting from the top, so what teams I think are going to be finishing near the top, and then which teams finally are going to be getting eliminated, which for each group we're having 2 teams getting knocked out for 4 teams in total, which is the most that we've had at a group stage in TI, at least in a while. I know the format used to be different back in the day, but regardless. Okay, kicking things off with Group A, finishing in the top 2 for sure. And I'm not going to necessarily rank these rows or anything like that. I just have them grouped in 2 just because group stages can be pretty fluctuant. So I think if I just get it in the general ballpark, that's pretty good. But for Group A, I didn't really have a hard time putting PSG.LGD at number 1. We only saw them play at 1 LAN this past year, and they put up the most dominant group stage performance out of any team this past year, going 7-1-0, dropping 1 game in the entire group stage. No team was ever even close to doing that this year. I think the most series win a team had this past year was 3, and these guys put up 7 in the only tournament that they played. And then they, of course, went to the grand finals where they would eventually lose. But yeah, PSG.LGD, I have no doubt in my mind, these guys are, at the worst, a top 2 team, in Group A. For number 2, and this one's a little interesting because I feel like this one can go either 2nd place or 3rd place overall, but I'll put them up there. Boom overall has looked fantastic. What a great season for these guys. I think they really have everything that they need at this point, bringing in their new carry player after getting rid of Tino after the first tour. It felt like he was really the weak link of the team at that point, and so once they brought in Jackie, the team really felt like it came together, and boom. Although they didn't necessarily have amazing tournament runs this past year, still a team to look out for, and still a team that I think will do quite well in the group stage. And that brings me to my next team here, which might catch a few people off guard because they didn't qualify to TI until a few days ago. And that's going to be Team Liquid. I think that if there was anything that we learned from the previous major formats of last year, where we had the wildcard stage, then the group stage, and then the playoff bracket, where we had some teams playing 40 games before they ever made it to the playoffs, and some teams that hadn't played any by the time the playoffs start, it shows that momentum can be very important. And for Team Liquid, they had just played 5 long games of Dota, where they got to experience some of the best teams in the DPC, putting on their best strategies to try and make it to TI. They have looked rather dominant in doing so. Everyone on their team was playing fantastic. A lot of weak links were showing throughout the past year. That seemed to fade away a lot in the last chance qualifiers. And again, I think momentum is going to play a huge role in Liquid making it far in this tournament, and just in general. We'll see if that carries over to Team Secret when I do Group B, but for now I have Team Liquid finishing, I believe, in the upper bracket for Group A. And to round out the upper bracket for Group A, we'll go with another Western European team, OG. Again, 2 fantastic major runs this past year, and those were off of the back of 2 pretty solid group stage performances. Nothing really crazy, but at the same time, it was quite reliable, which is what you want heading into TI. And if there's anything that we know about OG, is that this org just has something with TI where they just perform really well, or when they make it to a main stage bracket, they do really well. And so OG, I think, is going to be super dangerous, regardless of the fact that it is a brand new roster. All right, kicking things off with our lower bracket, and I'm going to be starting things off with RNG. RNG, again, just a super consistent team. They've had a pretty good time this past year, especially after making those roster changes where, again, very similar to Boom, it felt like their carry player, God King, was costing them a lot of games, was causing a lot of that inconsistency. They have since made those changes to their roster, and they're heading into this year's International and looking pretty good. I don't necessarily think that they're a upper bracket team, but they're the closest team to it in this group, as long as they, according to my predictions. And so I think 5th place would be pretty good for them, which brings me now to my 6th place team. And I'm a little conflicted on this one because I don't know what to expect from Evil Geniuses. These guys have not really looked like the dominant team that they were last year throughout this past season. And even last year with that dominant performance, they really struggled in the group stage as opposed to what we were expecting. They ended up finishing in the lower bracket from their group. And so for EG, this is more just a safe pick where I don't really feel comfortable having them in the upper bracket, but I don't see them getting eliminated by any means. I think having them right smack in the middle is pretty darn accurate. And the same thing goes for the next team here, Gaming Gladiators. Again, fantastic season. I think they started off a lot stronger than they ended up finishing, but not a problem if you're able to get that momentum back. If they were just, kind of letting off the gas a little bit because they were going a little bit too hard, they wanted to give themselves some energy for TI. Makes total sense. We'll see how Gaming Gladiators does in this tournament. And I know I have them near the bottom of the group, but keep in mind there are 10 teams in this group. Finishing 7th place is not that bad. Gaming Gladiators, I wouldn't be surprised if they finished a little higher. I think right now, any of the teams that I have in the lower bracket could be interchanged with one another. Again, this is not verbatim. This is not trying to be exact. This is just a kind of rough prediction of what I think the groups should look like. All right, next up. And this one is going to be interesting because there's 2 teams here that I think could take this last spot. But I'm going to go with my gut and say that it's going to go to BetBoom. BetBoom just overall has some TI experience. They, of course, have Roger, who's been to numerous TIs and all that. And I think this team is pretty good. They had a decent run, again, especially in the second tour, where they took advantage of the fact that there was no full tour. They just had that mini playoff bracket. They won the whole thing, sweeped it. But overall, I don't see them as an upper bracket team. I don't see them necessarily being close. That doesn't mean that they can't be. Of course, we've seen dream runs before. But for now, I have them finishing near the bottom of the group. And the team that I was debating putting above them is Sonics. But I really have a hard time with Sonics because it feels like it's been forever that these guys have been one of the best teams in North America. And in points during this past year, they were the best team in North America, and in past years as well. And then they get to a LAN and it just completely falls apart. Their performance last year as Quincy Crew at TI10 in the group stage was one of the worst performances I've ever seen. Like, I was legitimately watching these games and confused. Their team fight coordination, it just felt like an amateur 4K party pub team. It was just falling apart. They lucked out by winning a best of 1 thanks to Lelis, who was ratting on his Nature's Prophet last year. But I just think that these guys struggle a little too hard. And had there not been a team like SG Esports or Thunder Predator in their group last year who tanked so hard in the group stage, they would have been one of the eliminations from that group. And now that there's 2 teams getting eliminated from each group, I have to go with Sonics here. I would love to see them do better, but they've just given me really nothing to expect from them at LANs. So, and finally, to round things off, I know it's a bit of an easy pick, but we have Hokori. Hokori, again, coming in from South America, which traditionally has been one of the weaker regions, but that's not why I have them last. They also came in through the regional qualifiers where they had a bit of a tough time, but they also had some really, really fortunate circumstances for them with opposing teams going through controversies that gave them some minor suspensions through their drafting phase, or teams that just lagged out partway through a match. Hokori has made it here, but it wasn't as impressive as some other teams that made it through the regional qualifiers or the last chance qualifiers for that matter. And just looking at the other teams in this group, I just have a hard time placing them above 9th place. So that's going to do it for Group A. And now we're going to be getting into Group B, where I have no idea. If this was main stage bracket, I could kind of make an assumption on which teams I think are going to finish, top 6, top 4, maybe grand finals. But group stage are a completely different beast. It is just a completely different thing. And so I don't know where to go from here. I think a safe bet would be to put the defending champions in the top 2. Obviously, that would make a lot of sense. They had some pretty damn good performances this past season, especially finishing first place at the last major. So I think I'll stick with that for now. I feel like that feels pretty safe. But yeah, just looking at the rest of the teams in this group here, geez, how oh my god, how am I going to do this? Okay, all right. I'm just going to kind of speed run it, and I'll probably edit it a few times along the way. The hardest part is I don't know who gets eliminated from this group. What 2 teams do I pick to get eliminated from this group? Again, some people might want to pick on the American teams like TSM and Thunder Awaken, but Thunder Awaken has had a pretty fantastic year. I know Thunder Predator did last year, but this is a different roster, a different play style of Dota. This is definitely a stompy type of Dota, which is what you look for in a group stage because it's a lot more chaotic than in a playoff bracket where teams have a lot more time to prepare against you. So I do think Thunder Awaken should be, at the worst, a top 6 team in this group, but I could definitely see them making upper bracket. But that doesn't really help my case. What 2 teams are getting eliminated here? Beast Coast has done pretty well, give or take, in their group stage performances as well. Do I have them finishing above Thunder Awaken? Probably not. I would probably have them a little bit below. That's probably where I'll go with them there. And now it's, oh my god, this is difficult. Because no matter who I put at the bottom of the group, there's a reason to argue against it. Like, I have arguments for why I have these 2 teams in the bottom of Group A. I just can't argue for any of these teams finishing bottom of the group. So, I'll go for Talon next. I'll talk about them next. I think Talon should do pretty well. I don't necessarily know if they're going to be an upper bracket team. I do think they do have some flaws in their game, and we saw that quite a bit through their past season, but they still got themselves a TI. They still looked pretty damn good, and so I'm going to have them probably finishing either 5th and 6th or 7th, 8th, somewhere in the lower bracket. I don't see them getting eliminated. Team Secret, I think they should finish in the lower bracket as well. I don't think they're going to have as much momentum as Liquid. I think they actually looked a little shakier than Liquid, despite the fact that they swept their bracket. But their group stage performance was all right. They went 1-4-0. They didn't lose any series, but they also only won 1. In general, Team Secret hasn't been amazing in group stage formats. They didn't even make a single major out of their region this entire year. So I think 5th, 6th is a pretty good spot to have them. Next up, TSM FTX. I have no idea. Okay, I'm going to put Tundra in the upper bracket. I think Tundra should do well. They have done pretty well this past year. Obviously, a few inconsistencies here and there, but they end off pretty strong. And I should see them as a top performing team. Again, they have that TI experience with Soxa being on their roster now. We'll see how that goes. And of course, Fada's not on their team anymore. What am I saying? Okay, TSM FTX. Maybe I'll bump up Thunder. I think Thunder can make it to the upper. I don't know if Secret will, but again, that momentum can make. Okay, I'll put Secret there. I'll put Thunder down, which means I now have 3 teams left: Aster, Entity, and Fnatic, and 2 of those teams have to get eliminated per my predictions. Entity ended off really strong. I think I'm going to put... I know they ended off strong. They swept their bracket to get here through their Western European qualifiers. But I also think that the teams that they had faced, like mainly Liquid and Secret, weren't playing as well as they did in those last chance qualifiers. And if we're using that as a comparison, then I do think that they should finish near the bottom of the group. Do they get eliminated? I don't know, but I definitely have them near the bottom of the group. And I think I'm going to put Fnatic near the bottom too. And it really pains me because I think Fnatic is such an amazing team, but they struggled a lot in the group stage last year, which is, again, they had a fantastic year last year as well. And then last year in the group stage, it felt like all of their games would go to an hour and then they would lose. And it's just like, yeah, so I have to put them there, which means we'll put Aster top 2, which I feel pretty confident with. Aster has put up a fantastic season. They struggled a little bit here and there, specifically against RNG earlier on in the season, but they have come around. They've had some great LAN performances, namely at Arlington. And so, yeah, I think that's going to do it. I'm not going to bother pulling my hair out anymore. If you guys have any issues with this list, feel free to make your own. I actually made this a template. You can check it out, link in the description, as well as the link to our Discord. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below, as always, and I will talk to you guys later.